Hey everyone, Dr. Paul here, just wrapping things up from last week's fight, where our actors battled it out over the wicked and dirty and sometimes pitiable Lady Macbeth and Macbeth. Then you got to decide who's more vile. Well, the results are in, and it looks like you thought... Who was the reigning monarch of malevolence in last week's fight? The results are in, and you decided Macbeth was way more vile. Thanks for sharing your decision in the comments. If you missed that fight, just click on the link that's popped up and that will take you right to it. Tonight, I'm going to dig a little deeper into the psyches of the terrifying Lady M and her murderous and murdered husband, Macbeth. First, Lady M. Something we didn't hear much about in last week's fight is how Lady Macbeth might be just as much of a tragic hero as her husband is. If you watched last week's fight, you heard Rebecca de Boer argue that Lady M's husband is not a villain. He's a tragic hero, cursed with the fatal flaw of vaulting ambition. But Lady M is equally ambitious. She's less fearful and openly regretful than her husband is, but she suffered so deeply that she became mentally ill and finally ended her life. Maybe her conscience and regret were greater than she was letting on. A tragic hero is someone whose downfall hits us in the gut, even if they've done some really bad things, because we've been allowed to see their human side. It doesn't mean we respect or admire them, but we've come to understand them a little, and that helps us to feel some sympathy for them. And there's more. The play gives no hint to her backstory, except that she possibly lost a child. She has no friends or confidants beyond her husband, who she tends to manipulate and degrade rather than really love. No one talks about her until she starts sleepwalking and sleep-talking, at which point she is watched from a distance and spoken about as if she is ill, which she is. She is, essentially, a no one. Even after she dies, her husband goes off on a long and admittedly beautiful soliloquy about the futility of life in general, rather than about his own wife's brief life. No wonder Lady Macbeth jumps at some chance of some power, of some influence, to be the Queen of Scotland. And what does it take to have real power? Well, not being a woman helps. Even the witches, though we call them weird sisters, seem to have ambiguous genders. Men generally have all the power. They're the kings, the generals, the thanes, that's the lords. By contrast, Lady M's power is only over her husband. She is a pretty powerless woman trapped in a life of domesticity. No wonder she begs to be unsexed. Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here, and fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty. I mean, really, what has she got to lose? That is, of course, except her humanity. Now on to Macbeth. Definitely a butcher, and that makes him bad. But is he really worse than any of his peers? Let's take a look. The play begins and ends in violence, in dismemberment. Macbeth and Banquo are fighting for King Duncan against the rebel Macdonald, who Macbeth destroys in Act 1, Scene 2. To be specific, Macbeth unseams him from nave to chops, that is, rips him up from crotch to jaw, and fixes his head on the battlements. The play ends in the same bloody act, but this time it's Macbeth's severed head that is held up as a lesson to rebels. So it's violence all round. Macduff, the man who kills Macbeth, is not necessarily trying to bring peace to Scotland. He is seeking revenge against a man who has killed his entire family. It's understandable that he wants revenge, but is he proving to be any less bloody and violent than Macbeth? It looks like Macbeth's death hasn't really solved the problem of violence in Scotland. And who's going to be king? Malcolm, son of the slain King Duncan. And what has Malcolm just done? He's aligned himself with Macbeth's evil characteristics. He says that Macbeth is luxurious, that means lecherous, avaricious, means greedy, false, deceitful, sudden, means quick to violence, malicious, and smacking of every sin that has a name. Malcolm follows this with a list of his own sins. He says no woman is safe in the face of his lechery. He admits that he's greedy and that his greed is bottomless. He also says out loud that he has no interest in the qualities required of a king, such as justice, verity, temperance, stableness, bounty, perseverance, mercy, lowliness, devotion, patience, courage, and fortitude. And then he confesses, had I power, I should pour the sweet milk of concord into hell, uproar the universal peace, confound all unity on earth. About 30 lines later, he says this was false speaking, but it kind of makes us think twice about what he's really like. Would such a kingship really promise civil rest? Macduff, listening to Malcolm's outburst, may sum everything up best about the whole play, even post-Macbeth, when he laments, "Oh, Scotland, Scotland." So is Macbeth really worse than his peers? I can just hear a young Macbeth saying, everyone else is doing it, so why can't I? And that's it for this play, at least for now. Be sure to tune in next week for an exciting match that pits the ferocious Hamlet against the spirited duo Ophelia and Queen Gertrude. Is Hamlet a card-carrying incel or the prince of philosophical revenge? You'll decide after the big fight.